I would say that anybody who makes dumb anime videos on YouTube knows who ThatAnimeSnob is, and what he does. And if you don't, the TLDR is that he makes videos critiquing modern anime based on his warped perception of what a good anime is, something that he never justifies. I started watching anime about 2 years ago, after a friend got me into it, and after jumping around YouTube a lot, I found Snob, and originally I thought he was great. He always played a devil's advocate, and would argue that things were never as good as you think they were, and that was refreshing considering a lot of the content at the time was circle jerking over the latest hits. But I was just getting into the medium, and as time went on I experienced a slowly developing disdain for the content he produced. Largely due to the fact that he never had anything positive to say about anything, which can get quite draining at times, but also due to his lack of reasoning. Here's where I'll take apart one of his latest videos in an effort to show what I mean.
So I watched this movie that everybody hypes just a few months after the release of Your Name, and it's of course the next best movie of all times, just like everything that is new is the best whatever of all times.
He comes straight out of the gate with a Your Name comparison, which serves no other purpose than for him to say this bad movie is better than this bad movie, even though they have nothing in common other than a romance element and the fact they came out around the same time. And then goes on to make a weird jab at both Boku no Hero and Naruto that serves absolutely no purpose.
There is not much of a story going on in here, and the cast can all be described in a couple of lines.
Snob says there's not much of a story going on here because his idea of a good story is giant robots and space armadas blowing up.
The reason for that is simple. There was nothing relatable as far as I'm concerned, since I grew up watching giant robots and space armadas blowing shit up.
Not something emotional, because being emotional makes you an emotional fag. He goes on to say that he won't judge a movie based on how it made him feel, because that metric is useless and has no bearing on the quality. When realistically, the more a movie makes you feel, the more emotional investment you have in it, which would usually apply a level of quality. I'm not saying that a good movie will make you cry, I'm saying that a good movie is likely to make you cry due to emotional investment in either character or plot, something Snob clearly doesn't understand. Snob then talks about the bland skill setting and the bullying that's portrayed.
Was it looked into better than usual? Yes, it did, since it had repercussions. Not that it was amazing as far as theme exploration goes, it's still fairly silly, just like everything that happens in such stories.
He says was looked into better than most anime because it had repercussions, but wasn't amazing in terms of themes. Which is an absolute load of bullshit. Feels like Snob doesn't even watch anything he critiques, he just spins a wheel and whatever he lands on is the buzzword he'll use to justify himself. Koei no Katachi is a great exploration in bullying and disability for the simple fact that the whole time Ishida blames himself and himself alone for what happened to Nishimiya, when in reality everyone bullied her, and not just physically but emotionally too, and that's something he helps them all come to terms with. And that isn't considered good thematic exploration. He attempts to justify his position with an anecdote about how he was bullied and how he beat up his bullies because back in the day that was okay, and it was just manly men being manly. And to me this argument encapsulates Snob's entire outlook. He doesn't understand that culture changes and that he's still left in the past while others are still moving forward.
What we get instead of a glorious post-apocalyptic story about cyborgs and transhumanism is a deaf girl that is cute and shy, so everybody would want to protect that smile, regardless of her not having any talents or much of a personality. Oh, and she also tries to kill herself because of first world problems in high school. This sounds really serious, doesn't it?
After some vague allusion to what I can only assume is Trigun, again for no reason, he moves on to bashing Nishimiya for being talentless and lacking a personality. Not something I can exactly refute considering we don't really get to know her on account of all the audience's interactions with her being secondary, i.e. when people translate for her. What really gets me is this casual dismissal he has of suicide, like it's some sort of joke to him. Like people haven't taken their lives over things they feel they can't change. And because Snob can't personally relate to this situation, it's bad writing.
But it's okay since the bully jumps in and grabs her mid-air, something which is extremely improbable to happen successfully.
And yes, Ishida catching Nishimiya was improbable, but again, it's like Snob didn't even watch the movie. Ishida doesn't have the strength to pull up Nishimiya, so he literally sacrifices himself for her, and that's supposed to be cheap and forced? The characters aren't relatable because Snob doesn't try to relate to them. He just sits in his ivory tower saying whatever nonsense comes to him because he has to make that one video a day deadline.
We are not even given any reason for why the bully and its victim had feelings for each other. I mean, why would you love the guy who tortures you?
Once again, I would agree that there's no reason for the main characters to have romantic feelings for each other, but that's not what the story was about. He was filled with regret, and she's unnaturally kind and wanted to forgive him. The friendship they formed was platonic, and the fact that Snob didn't see that is the kind of thing I'm talking about. He'll rant and rave about themes and good writing and forced drama, but he knows nothing about them, even when slapped in the face with them.
And I might as well inform you that from personal experience, dealing with deaf people is exhausting. I had a friend who was gradually losing his hearing as time went on. We reached a point where I had to be yelling the same thing 3 times. It was such a bother I stopped talking to him after a while. And yet there is no such problem in this movie, so once again it's completely unrelatable as far as I'm concerned.
He uses another anecdote talking about her personal dealings with a deaf friend and how exhausting it is, and then goes on to say that the movie doesn't address this at all. Like the first half of the movie never happened. Like she wasn't bullied by the other children because she was seen as a burden. This is the most egregious example of how Snob will misrepresent a movie, and sometimes even other people, by taking things out of context. That's not the end of the video, but it is the end of his critique of the movie, so I don't have a want or a need to continue going on about it. I've watched Snob since I started watching anime, and he hasn't evolved in the slightest. And whether that's due to his reliance on ThatAnimeSnob as a character, or whether he truly believes what he says, I don't think we'll ever know. But I will say that I wish he'd grow up.